also like to thank our pillar partners, Focus College and the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan by SNF Group Benefits. Can I get a round of applause for these folks? Thank you. Now, it's also time for me to acknowledge some special guests in the audience. Please stand and wave as I call your name. And because I don't think the minister has been here before to see the one-clap method, you guys know what it is. We're going to show them how it's done. And it's going to be really tricky because of the long titles. Okay, so let's go. Canada's Minister of Justice and Attorney General, the Honourable Sean Fraser. Gerbucks. Mayor, can you show him how it's done? MP for Fleetwood Port Kells, Gerbucks Saini. See? Okay, MP for South Surrey, White Rock, Ernie Claassen. Parliamentary Secretary for Surrey Infrastructure and MLA for Surrey Guildford, Gary Begg. MLA for Surrey Cloverdale, Eleanor Sturco. Mayor of Surrey, Her Worship Brenda Locke. City of Surrey Councillors Linda Annis and Rob Stutt. See, it's fun, isn't it? We like to entertain ourselves here. Okay, we get to do it some more. So you've had your coffee, you're ready. We're also going to welcome our board of directors who are here in the audience. Roger Steers, board chair from RJC Engineers. Roy Morgan, immediate past chair with KSW Lawyers. Gurdeep Sahota, Royal LePage Global Force Realty. You guys are doing well for a morning, wow. Gurjinder Burji, Signature Real Estate Group. Harp Kayla Real Estate Group. Nikki Dollywall, Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Okay, we're getting a little lazy now, come on. Okay, Sasha Ramnarine of Remedios Lawyers Law Corporation. Nathan Van Kuyk, I'm always saying it wrong, Nathan. Nathan Van Kuyk, Rosalie Preventative Maintenance. And Lee Gong Van Casa Building Supplies. Okay, we also have our governors in the audience, and today we're lucky to have one of them. These are individuals that have previously served as board chair, so in other words, superstar volunteers. James Stewart is here. Thank you, James. We also have one of our members, but also a fellow Chamberland colleague. Jen Temple is the president of the Cloverdale and District Chamber of Commerce. Perfect. And also, like, Queen of the Rodeo. I'm gonna give you a new title. Queen of the Rodeo. Calgary's got nothing on us. The Surrey and White Rock Board of Trade is an independent nonprofit organization and serves as the concierge of connections for our business communities, delivering a diversified service portfolio of business development, support for international trade, government advocacy, and workforce development. And also a little bit of fun here and there, right? We help businesses grow and succeed. We connect people, offer vital resources, and actively push for policies that ensure Surrey and White Rock continue to be the leading cities to live, work, and invest. We are proud to be a powerful, unifying voice for businesses of all sizes and sectors across the region. As one of Canada's fastest growing regions, Surrey and White Rock are experiencing both tremendous opportunity and complex challenges, from public safety and community confidence to regulatory frameworks, labor issues, and the legal systems that support economic activity. A strong and effective justice system plays a critical role in creating the conditions businesses need to invest, grow, and succeed. That's why I'm especially pleased to welcome our speaker today. Before entering politics, he had a successful legal career with one of Canada's top-ranked law firms, where he practiced commercial litigation and international dispute resolution. He was first elected as MP in 2015 and has previously served as Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, and Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship. Today, he joins us as Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada. Please help me welcome the Honourable Sean Fraser.
Hello and good morning, everyone. It's really kind of you all to come. I know the mornings in the summertime, people usually have better things to do than come listen to politicians talk for a few minutes. But it was important for me to get out to Surrey in particular. I know a number of my colleagues, Gerbucks and Ernie, are here today, but others who represent the region have been telling me just the extraordinary importance of the public safety agenda to the communities that they represent. We often talk about the public safety agenda and criminal justice reform in the context of people feeling unsafe in their communities, questioning whether the place that they've always called home is the place that they want to call home in the future. But it's important that we recognize it's not just people in their homes that are concerned about the quality of life they enjoy based on the public safety challenges they're facing. The business community has been at the front of this conversation in many ways because it's their customers who stop showing up when their downtowns feel unsafe, when they are worried about theft, a stream of thefts or vandalism impacting their businesses. Many of them are choosing to close up shop or worried that that's going to be coming down the road for them. There's a couple different aspects that I'll want to cover in my conversation today, but I think it's important to start on the public safety issue. When we formed government after the last election and the Prime Minister asked me to take on this particular job, it was very clear that the public safety agenda was the #1 priority. We can't expect people to be making big decisions about how they're going to invest, growing their business, if they don't have confidence that the community in which they live is going to be safe. The strategy that we developed over the course of last summer rests on 3 key pillars. The first is to reform Canada's criminal law to strengthen it, to ensure we're sending a very strong signal that violent repeat offenders won't be tolerated and will face consequences should they behave in a dangerous or violent way. The second pillar is to make sure that we actually give those on the ground the tools that they need to help investigate, prosecute crime, and bring perpetrators of violent crime to justice. The third, and I would argue the most important, takes a much longer term view. And it's to make the upstream investments in things like affordable and transitional housing and mental health and addictions and programs that target at-risk youth to divert people away from a criminal lifestyle earlier in life. So the long-term goal is not necessarily to have more people incarcerated, but to have less crime in our communities in the first place. This strategy is rolling out at a pace that many people did not think was going to take the shape that it has, particularly on that first pillar, strengthening Canada's criminal laws. Over the course of the past year, we've seen more than any other policy area, public safety has dominated the parliamentary agenda. There's 3 very specific criminal law bills that have reformed the criminal code in an important way on hate crimes, protecting victims, and reforming bail and sentencing. But there's also a series of other pieces of legislation around cybersecurity, around integrity in the immigration system, around giving investigative tools to police that continue to work their way through the process. But what's potentially gotten more attention than anything else is the sea change that we've seen when it comes to how we're dealing with the bail system in Canada and stronger sentences for violent repeat offenders. That particular bill was one of the most engaging and collaborative exercises that I've seen. And I want to say thank you to members of the community here from the municipality, the mayor. We've got the Board of Trade has spoken publicly about these issues in the past and specifically on the bill. Without the advocacy of communities, I don't know that we would have had the opportunity to build a political narrative that got virtually everyone in the country behind it to say, this really is the time to move. The willingness of the business community to contribute their voice to the legislation has led to very specific reforms that are now the law in Canada. They're actually going to be taking effect by the end of next week. But it was the business community who advocated to include as an aggravating factor crimes that were of an organized retail variety. When we see large numbers of people being motivated by personal profit, taking from businesses and threatening the livelihood of business owners, we want to send a strong signal that you should face more serious consequences than has historically been the case. We also heard loud and clear from municipalities and from business advocacy organizations that although it's appropriate to focus on the most violent offenders, there's a separate issue that we needed to deal with, which is the phenomenon of high volume offenders. In many communities, we are seeing 80 or sometimes 90% of the criminal infractions committed by a very small number of individuals. And if we can turn our attention to people who heretofore with impunity have been committing crimes and threatening the livelihoods of downtowns, not just individual businesses, but entire communities, we're sending a signal in the criminal code to courts that we want you, when you're considering whether you're going to release a person or not, One of the steps in the test is to consider whether the release of a person would bring the administration of justice into disrepute. And we're saying when you're doing that analysis, we explicitly want you to consider not only the seriousness of the offense with which a person has been charged, but the history of offenses with which that person has been charged. If they're, it came up yesterday, there was a single individual, I think, was facing 27 different charges. And my experience talking to anyone who will have a conversation across Canada is that people are very happy to offer someone a second chance, but not a 27th chance. By the time that you become known to everyone in the community as the reason why businesses are thinking of closing down, the criminal justice system needs to respond. These changes came directly from conversations with business advocacy organizations, with communities who are living through the challenges that we are now trying to solve. As a result of that advocacy, we've been able to build the case that has brought Canadians along to see the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act become law. I would be remiss in this community in particular if I didn't draw attention to the extraordinary challenges that you've seen with extortion over the past few years. Our colleagues, Gerbucks, Ernie, Suk, I don't know if he's here, Randeep, have been in my ear consistently about the need to take a stronger approach when it comes to extortion. We've seen in the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act changes with violent cases of extortion resulting in tougher bail provisions. We're also seeing new consecutive sentencing attached to extortion-related crimes. But some of the work that we've been doing has been not just changing the criminal law, but doing what we can to support law enforcement in their investigations. I assume by now most people have seen the news yesterday with the cross-border collaboration bringing down 3 different criminal organizations who are responsible for an extraordinary amount of the extortion we're seeing in our communities. I expect what you're going to see as a result of the work of law enforcement with respect to those organizations is a sharp decrease in the level of extortion that communities have been experiencing in Canada. Surrey in particular has faced disproportionately the consequences of those crimes, and I hope that there is a sigh of relief being breathed by members of this community. This doesn't mean all of the problems go away tomorrow. That's never the way of the world, but it is a major step in the right direction. There's 2 other themes I'll touch on quickly because so much of the conversation around the business community in the justice system has been around public safety. But there's other principles that I don't think we should forget and that become readily apparent to me when I travel internationally for work. We are very, very lucky to live in this country with the legal system we have, despite whatever faults may exist. When we're able to provide regulatory certainty to the business community, the investment community, people are comparing what the life looks like if they make an investment in Canada versus any other country in the world. We have seen a massive uptick in interest from foreign investors who want to do business in Canada. And whether it directly impacts small and medium-sized businesses that may be members of the Board of Trade locally or not, the trickle-down effect of having a big investment come into your community certainly reaches workers and supports businesses even at a retail level. But the final point that I'll make that perhaps makes me most proud when I'm chatting with my counterparts around the world is the importance of the rule of law to investment in the world. I can tell you when I have conversations with some of my counterparts who understand very well that top to bottom they deal with corruption inside the system, where it seems the government is not subject to the law, though they subject others to it. They cannot attract business to their respective jurisdictions. If an investor fears they're going to, halfway through an investment, have to start paying off local officials to get business done, they choose not to do business there. We have a long-standing culture in Canada to respect the rule of law, understand that governments who make laws are themselves subject to it. It is something that's very precious that we should not take for granted. But when we defend the principles that we believe in, it's not just the right thing to do. You realize it's the smart thing to do. By continuing to respond to the challenges that we face, both the philosophical questions about the rule of law, but the very practical implications about public safety, we can use the justice system to foster business growth in this country. I don't want to presume you want to hear me from the microphone for the rest of the morning, but very happy to engage in a conversation. But just to conclude, I just want to say thank you to everyone who puts your name forward. We're doing everything we can to build a stronger economy in this country, and that starts with the business community. So to those who are engaged in business, who are hiring people in the community, you're part of a very important Team Canada effort, and I want to say thank you on behalf of the Government of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Really appreciate those comments. Since this is your first time here with us, I'll let you know that we don't dive right in. We actually take a moment to get to know you as a person, just with one question. And that is, what is your origin story? So to give you a little bit, a moment to think about that, what I noticed here is that you're very passionate about the topic that you are responsible for. And I have rarely seen someone who can speak in such detail without any notes. And that tells me it's coming from somewhere else. So how did you get to be who you are?
Yeah, where to start? I grew up in a really small rural community in Nova Scotia. It's a total population of about 200 people in the middle of the woods, and 8 of them were my immediate family. And I grew up in a house with 5 sisters and tons of cousins sort of hanging out. But we just spend our time at a home. Mom and Dad would have the neighbors over and debate the great issues of the day. But they always talked the way that ordinary people talked, and I felt like we had the most, I didn't realize at the time, but the most vibrant conversations about issues that really matter to people, but grounded in the experience of not necessarily deep thinkers on university campuses, but on real people who were living through challenges that happened to coincide with the political issues of the day. Mom and Dad were both teachers. They really pushed education on me and all of my sisters, and I took that to heart. I spent too many years in university, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I went to a small school originally in the town where I was born, Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and studied law in Halifax, and had an opportunity from there to work in Calgary, live overseas, studying international law, working for a human rights organization in South Africa, and came back desperately broke, needing to pay off student loans, and found myself in Calgary again to earn a paycheck. And when the opportunity came to sign up for public service, it's something that I always sort of cared about. I bounced between private sector opportunities and public service-oriented academic study or work opportunities. And I found the work that I get to do now sort of aligns with both of those sort of categories of personal interest. So just really enjoy getting to hear from people about the challenges that they're facing. I think there's lots of conversations you can have that are interesting if you sit on Parliament Hill in a boardroom with closed doors, but it won't mean anything to anybody. If you want to actually make change, you have to engage in the kind of conversations that we had around the kitchen table in Miragamish when I was growing up. And if you talk to people about what challenges they're facing in their real life, you can actually figure out how to solve them. And it's when you get to actually solve a problem and help a person, there's no greater reward.
That's great, thank you. I think it's the 5 sisters that toughened you up, right? Where are you in the lineup?
I'm 3rd of 6.
Okay, so in the middle. That's tough.
Yeah, you know what, being the only boy, I got my own room though. Everybody else had to share. The one downside, we hosted exchange students as well, and because I had my own room, I would get sent to the unfinished basement with a mattress in it for like 6 months at a time, so it was very, very glamorous.
The resilience is still with you today. So, Minister, there's been some comments around, these reforms to our laws have been in the works for a while, and now you've been in this role about a year? A little more. And now we're getting things done. So what was the push? What was the driving force behind getting this finally through the door?
Look, there's 2 that I'll draw attention to. One, and perhaps most obviously, communities were demanding action. There was not going to be a government elected that didn't take public safety seriously. You talk to somebody who's grew up in a community where they were used to playing ball hockey in the streets, and now when they're raising their kids, they're concerned about watching somebody steal the car through the ring camera. If you don't respond to something that is that visceral and personal in nature, you're not going to have a chance to form government and focus on the other big issues that you care about. And it wasn't as though there was one anecdote in one part of the country. Whether you were in my hometown in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia now, or you're in Surrey, or you're in Toronto, or you're in Iqaluit, it's pretty clear that people want it to change the way that the Government of Canada looks at violent repeat offenders in particular. There's more to the public safety agenda as well. We have challenges with hate crimes that are important to people. We have challenges with intimate partner violence that we absolutely need to address. But it was very clear that the public safety agenda had come to the fore not as a result of some deep political conversation in a back room somewhere, but because people were scared in their communities. And when people are worried for their health or safety, nothing else matters. You can't engage in a conversation about how you're going to boost GDP growth if a person is scared to go out in their neighborhood. So the number one push that really, I think, created space for a step in a different direction when it came to the criminal justice system was from ordinary people speaking their mind in public and doing it repeatedly and en masse. The second driver, I guess perhaps also obviously, is the Prime Minister. He made it a priority to address the public safety challenges that people were facing. In the conversation where he'd asked me to do this job, as I'd mentioned, it was the very first thing that he said. We need to get public safety under control in this country, and you're going to need to reform the criminal code to do so. From there was a few campaign commitments to deliver on, but we had probably 6 or 7 commitments, but 2 of the bills have 83 and 84 different reforms. That we were given a long leash to actually go out into communities and say, okay, we understand the problem perhaps better than we did a few years ago, but tell us how to fix it. And when you actually had the chance to, with the Prime Minister's blessing, go ask the business community, provincial governments, municipalities, and law enforcement, how do you fix these problems? They all had ideas. So with his leadership and the push from ordinary Canadians in their communities speaking out consistently, we've had the space open to implement reforms that may have been politically difficult or impossible in years past, but absolutely needed to happen.
Thank you. Now, yesterday we had the pleasure of hosting a roundtable for you with law enforcement and senior members of government. And one thing I noticed is that you were very much in listening mode. The Surrey and White Rock Board of Trade for many years, but especially recently with the extortion issues and of course retail crime that continues to be an issue for businesses, have been advocating for change. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you engaged with the business community and the impact that the business community's opinions and feedback had on these new laws?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting thing when you get elected for the first time, you take on a role as a parliamentary secretary or a minister for the first time. I'm convinced I've never been good at a job until I've had a year finding my feet in it. And there's steep learning curves in these jobs. They're all different. But the one thing that I've pulled out of my political experience over the past, I guess, 11 years now, is that people actually know how to solve their problems. They just need help sometimes. And you have to put in the time to demonstrate that you understand a problem. I don't know whose quote this is, but I've heard it said that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So step one is actually sit down with somebody and engage with them like you want to understand their problem so you can work on solving it with them. When you demonstrate an awareness of the problem, the fact that you actually want to be a partner in solving it, the solutions have been in their mind for years. When you are actually talking to the business community, small businesses who are facing rashes of break-ins, of vandalism, of shoplifting, sometimes they need a little bit of help with the cost of security equipment. Other times they want more street cops. They want more serious penalties for people who are known to be high-volume offenders. There's no shortage of ideas to draw upon when you actually sit down with a person and say, okay, you've told me this, how do you fix it? The aggravating factors on organized retail crime came from organizations like the Surrey White Rock Board of Trade. But it wasn't just one organization. It was many of them saying, this is a real problem that you need to address. Similarly, the business community, when it comes to essential infrastructure, was very adamant that the criminal code has a huge gap. We are treating theft of copper, for example, typically like theft under $5,000, a petty crime that is akin to a very small shoplifting type of offense in some instances. But the damages, when you actually take down a communications network because you've taken the copper, can reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. We were dealing with London Hydro, who had someone cut a 27,000 live wire, 27,000 volt live wire that caused an explosion that shut down a bridge and started a fire that had traffic interrupted in the city for a significant period of time. And the cost of repairing not just the utilities infrastructure, but the bridge itself was a taxpayer-funded project or a ratepayer-funded project in the case of the utility that reached into the millions. And when you see the criminal code doesn't reflect the actual damages that communities suffer, you realize we can change that. So by engaging with the business community, whether it's on dealing with high volume offenders, whether it's organized retail crime, whether it's essential infrastructure, we can point to very specific conversations I had. I still remember the names of some of the people who first raised these issues with me. And it's through that process of engagement you realize that the collective wisdom of Canadians is far greater than the individual wisdom of any minister, no matter how smart you think you are. So it's not that simple. You talk to people, you try to understand the problem, you ask them how you can help fix it, and they tell you the answer, and then it's up to you whether you do it.
Thank you for that. Actually, the Board of Trade first called for copper theft as receiving a lot more attention back in 2024, so we appreciate that example. Now, we have a really smart audience, really smart members, and so we do have a microphone open for questions. And I could have predicted the two of you would be the first up at the mic. So just so you know, Minister, we limit things to one question. People introduce themselves, their organization. They keep their questions brief and respectful. And if they're not brief enough, I send them to the back of the line. We know that, right, guys? Okay, John, over to you.
I'm John Lind with Mountain View Insurance, and my point is to do with reform for the Canada Elections Act. And I'll try to make it not so long-winded, but what happened on April 26th last year, I was hit by the vehicle, the Lapu tragedy, and I broke 13 ribs. I lacerated my kidney, punctured my spleen, and punctured my lung, and I was fortunate to survive. So eventually I wound up at Lionsgate Hospital, missed my twin daughter's 20th birthday the next day, and then the following day I was cognitive enough to know, oh, it's the federal election. And had my voter card, had my driver's license, no problem, Mr. Lind. We had people from Elections Canada last week. They'll come here and take your vote. Then it reached noon. Well, why is nobody coming to take my vote? And so I was told, well, you got to phone your elections office. I live in North Delta, 3 blocks from Surrey. And I phoned the Delta elections office, and they told me, no, you've got to phone North Vancouver because you're in hospital in North Vancouver. So then I phoned North Vancouver, and they said, well, we can't come out and take your vote because it's illegal for us to do so. Well, what do you mean it's illegal? This is crazy. I mean, federal prisoners can vote. And it was just like another gut punch. I was physically, mentally hurt. Now I felt I was punished. Well, from that time, what I've done is that February 17th, I had a meeting with my MP, Jill McKnight, the Honourable Jill McKnight, and she and her staff got in touch with Elections Canada. And sure enough, what is in the law for federal elections is that as a hospital patient, you have to actually register 6 days in advance of the election to be able to vote. Well, in this case, it was certainly not possible in that the election occurred 2 days after this tragedy. So I was left without a vote, and I feel very strongly that this is the type of thing that needs to be changed. Normally, I would have voted in the advance vote, but it was my daughter's first chance to vote. We were going to vote as a family, no problem. And so the way it's gone now is it's really stalled with Elections Canada, like nothing has happened with this issue. It's still a major flaw in legislation. I'd like to hear your comments on what maybe we could work together to fix this injustice.
Yeah, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear the experience. That's just a terrible tragedy that played out, and the personal impact of you is just astounding. I'm a little bit stunned to see you here asking the question this way. It's interesting, we've got the wrong person sitting in this chair. Usually you punt this to one of your colleagues who's formally responsible. The person I know who knows more about this issue than anyone else in Canada is my wife. She's a PhD in the law of democracy with a focus on voting rights, trying to make sure that we can actually implement legal reform to capture these unique kind of scenarios where people who are not just living in their ordinary residence that's in the certain constituency that's very easy to tell. There's all kinds of issues that pop up where people find themselves in an unusual or difficult place to try to vote. I've never heard about the hospital rule. I wasn't aware, actually, that the need to register in advance. It just strikes me as a bit odd that you would have to have a 6-day period when emergencies happen. It's not as though you can plan to be in the hospital before such a bizarre thing plays out in community. I'll have an opportunity to chat. I'm going to see actually Steve McKinnon, our House Leader, who's currently got a Canada Elections Act bill going through the process right now. I'm going to see him on Monday. I'll gladly have a conversation with him about this issue. I'd need to make sure that I actually have advice from a policy analyst and to understand, okay, is there a reason we've set it up? Is there a magic to the 6 days? Sometimes there's a justification for the rule that sounds bizarre to me when I first hear it, but somebody's thought about it and has a reason they did it a certain way. But from this conversation, I'll chat with my colleague on Monday to just figure out whether there'd be an opportunity to look at it and maybe have a conversation with someone in the department about why we would have that registration requirement for hospitals, but I was unaware of it until you put the question to me.
No, I'd be glad to give you my contact information after.
Yeah, there's a group at the back of the room. If you want to put your hand up, you can. Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Jamie.
Hi, James Stewart, a law firm of Hamilton Duncan. Also a lawyer, though it's been decades since I've been in a criminal court. One of the concerns that I have whenever there's a discussion about increasing or enforcing the law more strongly, like bail reform and the rest, is where do those people go? Our facilities, our criminal detention facilities are already, and pretrial facilities are already overfilled. So I'm kind of curious about if you start to put more people away and don't let them out on the street, as the way it is right now, not that I'm advocating for that, but what's your government going to do to provide the facilities to house the people that will inevitably be needing to be housed when the law has to be enforced as a result of these new changes?
Look, it's a good question, and the one of the challenges that we have is the answer's not the same in every part of the country because the systems, generally speaking, there's some exceptions to this, are run by provincial governments, and the capacity issues in BC and Ontario are not the same as they are in Nova Scotia or Quebec. So we need to work with provincial governments at a local level to identify what the need is to, in some instances, expand capacity of facilities. In other instances, there may be different solutions that we can deal with. In the long term, the goal is not to have more people incarcerated, it's to have less crime, so there's fewer people who need to be incarcerated in the first place. In the short term, we're probably going to see an increase of people who are detained because they've been denied bail. We may see people who are detained longer as a result of some of the aggravating factors, and the capacity of the corrections facilities is going to be an issue. In some instances, we are seeing provincial governments say we're going to expand capacity. In other instances, we're seeing a little bit of pushback. Truth be told, we don't necessarily have to account for a one extra space in the system for every other person who may be denied bail if we actually put the resources in the system to deal with things more quickly in the courts. There are a lot of people who are being detained pending trial, about 50% of which are not convicted at the end of the day and are released. If we can simultaneously address delays in the system to get people their day in court more quickly, we're also going to free up capacity by having less demand on the system. So through a combination of working with provincial governments who may wish to expand capacity in systems, partnering with us to see if we can better resource the systems to speed up the process so we have fewer people in pretrial detention because the process has been moved to completion more quickly. I think we can manage it, but in the short term, there is potentially going to be a crunch. One of the things that I've raised with my provincial counterparts from day one in this conversation was, if you're all going to shout at us, as you have been for the last couple of years to make these changes, there are going to be downstream implications for provincial governments. We are not seeking to just upload the cost of those decisions to the federal government. If there are opportunities for us to partner on national issues where we can potentially be a funding partner, give expertise. We're starting with data collection and the bail system across the country. There may be some role for us, but you have to understand that if you're asking us to change the rules, you as a provincial government need to be prepared to make the investments downstream in the, whether it's in the capacity in detention facilities, or it's more Crown prosecutors, more provincial court judges, whatever it may be. So this is a conversation that I think will play out over the next year or two. But when we get beyond those first few years, by addressing some delays and focusing on crime prevention, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to manage volumes more effectively.
Good morning.
This is Eleanor.
Oh, sorry, Eleanor Sturco, MLA for Surrey Cloverdale. I was a public safety critic previously and critic for mental health and addiction, and former RCMP officer. So in 2023, December 5, Bill C-48 received royal assent. That was a bail reform law brought forward by the federal government that also contained reverse onus. It also was meant to deal with domestic violence. It had many of the same provisions that have been included in our new Bail and Sentencing Reform Act that comes into law in the next week. So why is it that Bill C-48 failed so spectacularly? And even though it has many of the same principles that this new reform bill and law have in it, why is it that you believe that this time will be successful? Why do you think that it was unsuccessful, the changes brought forward by the government with Bill C-48?
So I don't actually think the changes in C-48 were unsuccessful. They were not as far-reaching as those in C-14. But you're only now seeing some of the changes that would have been made in C-48 get baked into the system. There's always a bit of a period of lag after you make the change before they're fully adopted from a cultural point of view. You'll see some changes the day after. There are other bills that we've been criticized for previously that touched on some of these issues in the criminal justice reform. But I don't think there's been a long enough period of time to declare that C-48 was a success or failure. I do think there's been some positive developments, and we're able to build on some of those. So there's not identical provisions in C-48 and C-14, but there are some similar principles behind the ideas. The strength that I think we're going to see from C-14 is it's far further reaching in terms of the offenses that we're targeting with reverse onuses, in terms of the conditions that we're looking at on bail, in terms of tackling the foundational principles around the principle of restraint, dealing not only with the most violent offenders, but the highest volume offenders as well, and a series of aggravating factors and consecutive sentencings that are distinct from C-48. The reason I've got confidence that C-14 is on the right path is because it wasn't crafted out of an ideological point of view with parliamentarians in Ottawa. It was written by law enforcement, by provincial governments, by municipalities, by business advocacy organizations who directly fed into the process. And we just took their ideas. When we had a rough idea of what we thought the bill was going to look like as a final product, we took it back to everybody who fed into the process again and said, are we missing anything else? Is there things that we've done in here that we've not done the right way? And that process of actually doing a temperature check with all of the stakeholders who know better than I do how to solve the problems that they're facing, we've been able to gain endorsements. It's nice politically if you get an endorsement, but it speaks to me that you've actually done the job the right way. So when I see that the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, the police associations in virtually every region of Canada, when I see business associations, when I see unanimous support from provincial governments in every region of every political stripe, it gives me confidence that we've got it right. The other commitment that I routinely make to those who fed into the process is if this isn't working a year or two from now, let's do it again. We need to make sure that we not only keep the door open, but we invest in data to understand, are the measures that we put in place having the intended impact? We started with a few $1 million we put on the table for provincial governments to uniformly collect bail data in a more standardized way, so we can measure the impact of the changes that we're making. So it's really the process that gives me confidence, the validation we see from people who work most closely to these problems, and the willingness to continue to engage to solve it on an ongoing basis. So to be clear, this is a step in the right direction. It is not going to solve all of our public safety challenges in one day. No piece of legislation will do that. But without making the reforms in the criminal law, the other investments that you're going to make are not going to have the intended impact. So we'll see. Time will tell. But I feel like we're on the right track. And if the data suggests otherwise, then we'll revisit how we address this over the next year or two.
Thank you, Minister. Now, yesterday you had a press conference at City Hall, and you spoke about the collaboration between local governments. The City of Surrey has traveled to Ottawa for undertaking advocacy efforts for our city. You spoke about Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma talking about the work that you've done with all of these groups, and you really talked about the collaboration. Can you tell us, like, what really happened here? What did that collaboration look like that you hadn't seen before?
This conversation started in a politically toxic place, to be clear. The narrative around crime and safety had been kryptonite for the Liberal Party of Canada. People didn't think we were serious enough about the issue and didn't have faith that we were actually going to make the changes necessary to actually improve public safety. When we started making phone calls and asking for people's feedback from other political actors in Canada, I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't become an opportunity where they were going to try to score a goal by bashing you over the head. They said, okay, new government, new prime minister, new minister, we're going to give you a chance before we try to turn this into a political opportunity for ourselves. And to their credit, every political party represented in a provincial government said, we want to be part of a Team Canada effort to fix this problem. If you're serious, as you say you are, we're going to be good partners here. So one by one, and then collectively in Kananaskis last year, we just started having conversations to say, okay, what does success look like to you? Are there specific ideas you're hearing? If you can actually go out on our behalf and engage with law enforcement you have great relationships with, we want to meet with them too, but we're happy to use the feedback directly through you. Nikki, there's a good example we discussed yesterday after the just horrific case of the murder of Bailey McCourt in July of last year. There were very specific issues in the legal system that were revealed as being obvious gaps that needed to be closed. The idea that we didn't have stricter provisions around bail for someone who's been convicted of a crime but was in community before they were sentenced is so obvious when you talk to an ordinary person. Yet the absence of a provision like we're including now it led to what feels like it should have been a preventable tragedy. That conversation turned into a specific provision in the bill that's now going to amend the criminal code. But there are several other examples I can point to with Minister Sharma, but there's also several other examples I can point to with every single one of my provincial counterparts. I even didn't just deal with my counterparts. I remember being on the phone as we were finalizing the version of this with the Prime Minister and with Doug Ford going over line by line. Are you guys comfortable with what's in here? If not, say so now. We don't want you to say it in the news after we give you this opportunity. If there's problems with it, you got to tell us. And to both of their credit, very different political actors, very different political perspectives on different issues. Everybody put their differences aside and said public safety is something we can all cooperate on. And when you started to see that the provincial ministers I worked most closely with were getting their provisions in the draft of the bill we were preparing, that created a belief that this was a good faith exercise and people wanted to participate more and more. So it was really just, look, my favorite piece of technology is a telephone. It's, if you pick it up and call somebody and you say, I want your ideas and I'm going to put it into a new law, that's a very healthy place to start. So it's just old-fashioned conversations, no real magic to it.
So a lot of these law reforms, they're quite diverse, from femicide to extortion to retail theft. You touched on femicide. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And I will tell you right now, the reason I ask is because I have a cousin who was a victim of murder that happened because of someone she knew. And so please tell us how that came about.
each one of the reforms is grounded in a real problem that we're living with. And so much of the conversation's been around bail reform in this country. Gender-based violence is a scourge in our communities, and it is so prevalent, and I don't think people who've not been personally impacted are aware of the scale and the impact, not just on the individual victim, but systemically on our communities. There is a woman killed every 48 hours in Canada. It's awful. In January, in the first week of the year in Quebec alone, we saw 6 cases of femicide. We need to take action. If we want to talk about values like equality and respect for equal respect for men and women, we better start with the women who are actually being killed and whose death is often ignored by members of the public. We decided to start with a constructive first-degree murder charge for hate-motivated murders. If you kill someone because they are a woman and because of your hatred towards women, we think that that is a more morally culpable offense than an ordinary case of murder, which is obviously already one of the most serious crimes that can be committed. But we didn't want to just stop at punishing bad actors after a murder's taken place. We worked really closely with women's advocacy organizations who've been advocating to develop a new offense called coercive control for a number of years. There's a few countries, a few subnational jurisdictions in the world who've done this, and Canada will be one of the early adopters. But the strength when you criminalize coercive control is that you give the legal system the opportunity to intervene in a relationship potentially before it becomes violent and before that violence becomes fatal. We can't just, though, use the criminal code for these conversations. These changes are being made in parallel with investments, about $50 million a year going to women's organizations on the ground, building into our Build Canada Homes housing agency, specific considerations about women who are fleeing domestic violence, making sure that we're building units that have 3 and 4 bedrooms so someone can actually take the children with them when they're fleeing a dangerous household. If you start to go through every policy area, and this is where a gender-based analysis is a very helpful tool, you come to understand that with small tweaks to programs, you can meet an entirely different need that may not have been central to the reason you chose to do something. But this really came about because of the pressing social challenges around violence against women and intimate partner violence in particular. Just since I've alluded to the Bailey McCourt case, their family's been tremendous advocates. They worked to develop very closely with our team over the last year or so to develop, it was Bill C-225, Bailey's Law, which went into effect shortly before some of the government's criminal law reforms and in advance of the anniversary of her death. That is actually the law that's formally responsible for the establishment of this femicide charge, though it was mirrored in a government bill as well. When you actually spend time sitting with people who've lost a loved one to a case of femicide, you can't leave that conversation and not commit yourself to taking action. It would just be an enormous moral failure. And when you become aware of such an injustice, the only thing to do is to figure out what's your role in helping solve the problem. And for my part, some of these criminal law reforms will, I think, have a meaningful impact.
Thank you for that. We have an incredible number of nonprofits in Surrey and White Rock who work daily to help women in trouble, as well as other members of the community who need help. So you mentioned something about the building fund that. Tell us a bit more about that so they know where to go and get some cash to help them do their good work.
So Build Canada Homes will have different sort of carve-outs or programs for different streams, but we're trying to centralize all of the applications through a single agency that will grow over time. Typically speaking, the way that we measure success in housing is just how many housing starts have there been this year. Truth be told, it doesn't paint an accurate picture when you're building one-bedroom apartments or condos versus family-sized units. It's a wonderful thing if you're building for people from different walks of life with different family dynamics. But very specifically, one of the reasons that we're looking at programs to build more bedrooms inside an individual unit rather than fixating solely on housing starts is because we understand there are different social needs that people have. If you only do the one bedroom piece, you're going to attract a lot of people who are investing in housing like a commodity rather than treating it as a home for a family to live in. Now, look, one bedroom apartments are great too, but they solve a different need. And when you actually start to engage with organizations that are dealing with violence prevention, for example, it's one of the top things they ask. They say there's a lot of people in abusive relationships who won't leave because the kids have no place to go. And even though it's dangerous for them, they don't want to be in a position where they remove themselves from danger and leave the kids behind. So what you should expect to see through Build Canada Homes is when there are specific projects that are designed to help women fleeing domestic violence that have unique bedroom designs in the units, that there will be specifically an opportunity created for the agency to fund those projects. There's never enough money in these programs to satisfy the enormous demand that we see in communities, but you should see more of the resources in that program oriented to those kinds of projects rather than solely dealing with as many starts as we can get so we can bump up the Stats Canada number.
Thank you. So another issue, and perhaps the issue that's dominated our conversation when it comes to community safety here in Surrey, has been extortion. This is an issue that's been targeting successful businesses and people, and of course has been a huge issue across the country. There was the Bishno gang arrest yesterday, and perhaps you can talk about that, but I'd like to know how these reforms strengthen the tools available to the police and the justice system to respond to extortion-related crime.
Yeah, so look, the arrest yesterday, this is phenomenal news. Most of the extortion, it's very rare you see a lone actor committing acts of extortion on a one-time basis. There is some copycat phenomenon that you'll be able to pull out where maybe somebody who's not part of a criminal organization will engage in that kind of behavior. But the vast majority of this is taking place in an ecosystem that has very sophisticated criminal organizations who are pulling the strings, often from other parts of the world. The signal that yesterday's arrests are going to send through Canada and the US are going to be enormous. You're likely to see high-profile extradition hearings take place for the individuals from Canada who are now being pursued by the United States justice system as well. It's going to have a very positive impact, and I think in the short term, but we can't, this is not a mission accomplished moment. This is a job well done to law enforcement. Let's keep going. There's some changes that we're making and that I discussed briefly in the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, but there is a major outstanding issue that I could actually use your help with, by the way. For those of you who are not familiar with this, it's a policy that's referred to as lawful access. Canada is the only Five Eyes or G7 nation that does not have provisions that allow law enforcement to more easily access digital evidence when they know there are people who are being investigated as part of a crime. I was with the Commissioner Carrique, the head of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, who said his first conversation about lawful access to digital evidence took place when I was in grade 6. And we have not moved the needle an inch since then. We have an opportunity right now with a bill that's going through Parliament that would still maintain protection, still require you to go to court to understand if an IP address is attached to a particular network. But what it would effectively do is shrink the time to get digital evidence. And we know the WhatsApp chats are where a lot of these conversations are being planned and taking place. And we can shrink the timeline from several months to a few days to actually have the police get their hands on the evidence they need to move forward with investigations. It's an interesting dynamic in the House of Commons right now. It's got unanimous support amongst government MPs. We do see the official opposition is completely split on the issue. There's a number of MPs, maybe a different party than me, great people, lots of experience in law enforcement, who are advocating amongst their colleagues to actually get on board with a bill that the previous Conservative government tried to do something very similar in 2013. and it sort of fell apart. But now we're seeing a split within the opposition of people who want to move forward with the tools that law enforcement are asking for, and another cohort who are, it feels some days, though there are serious issues around privacy you need to deal with, it seems as though it's devolving into a conversation around misinformation and conspiracy theories about the government trying to track everyone's phones about who they're visiting, where they're going, which is not at all what we're seeking to do. So if you want to continue to advocate, the number one thing that law enforcement are asking me for to help them crack down on extortion is to advance the Lawful Access Act. If you were inclined to, I know you've actually written letters of support, if you were going to engage on one issue as individual citizens or as a board of trade or as a municipality, this is the next step on the public safety agenda. And trying to build political support amongst different parties would be the number one thing that we could do. We are going to implement this act. It's now, obviously, with the majority context in the House of Commons that did not exist when we put it forward. We have that ability, but to the extent on matters of public safety, we can remove the politics and say this is something that we need to do to support our communities who are facing extortion. I think it would be a very nice thing to get multi-party support on such an important tool that the police are desperately asking for.
In our conversation yesterday, I was shocked to hear that police can sometimes they have to take up to a year to get into a phone. So how can they actually build a case when they can't even access the phone? So thank you for sharing that, and we're very much in support. That's all the time we have for questions, Minister. Is there are there any closing words, thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Look, if I can divorce myself from the portfolio for the moment, we are in the most interesting time right now in Canada. What's going on with the United States and their retreat from their role as our longest standing and most trustworthy trade partner, it's created so much uncertainty. It's inspiring us as a federal government to do things that we should have done 75 years ago. We need to be able to build an economy that can stand on its own 2 feet. That will mean engaging with other partners around the world. It will mean advancing major projects so we can build more quickly. It will mean investing in Canadian infrastructure and the business community. But you can't leave it to government. Don't assume, despite the fact the Prime Minister is an incredibly talented guy, he's very smart, he works very hard, we need the entire country to be pulling in the same direction, folks. The business community is going to be central to the path forward for the well-being of Canadians. We think we have an opportunity to position ourselves as a destination of choice for trade, for investment, for growth, and a range of different sectors. We can set the table. We need you guys to eat. This is a unique moment in time where if the business community in big cities and small towns can all embrace the fact that we're in it together, we can increase the quality of life that people get to experience. We can increase the wages that families earn. But I just think to myself, this is not a government initiative. This is a Canadian initiative. And to the extent the Board of Trade continue to foster that culture of ambition, the desire to build an economy for ourselves, not subservient to our neighbors to the south, we need you. We need you more than we've ever needed you before. So to the extent you're thinking of making that next investment, hiring that new employee, purchasing that new piece of equipment, this is a good time to do it. We want to make it easier. To the extent you have ideas on what we can do to make it easier for you to make those decisions, we want to know. But more than anything, we want you to realize that the success or failure of this enterprise we call Canada, it rests with all of us, not just with the government.
Amazing. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. The Surrey and White Rock Board of Trade is actively encouraging our members to diversify their trade portfolios. They've heard me go on and on about it. We just got back from a trade mission in China. We're going to Taiwan and we're going to India. So we are taking advantage of those trade deals that are being struck. So thank you for that. Once again, I'd like to thank our pillar partners, Focus College and the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan by SNF Group Benefits. Before you leave today, I want to remind you of some great events that we have coming up. Of course, tomorrow, July 9th, we have our first summer sizzle, and that one's happening at Chop Steakhouse and Bar in South Surrey. July 23rd, we have another one right back here on the rooftop at the Sheraton. August 13th, we have our Crescent Beach deck at Beecher Place. A lot of you were there last year. And we'll wrap up on August 27th on the patio of Milestone South Point, another great spot. We're also accepting nominations for our Environment and Business Awards and the Business Excellence Awards program. You guys know that that happens in the fall, and you all know excellent businesses that should be nominated. So please go forward and do that. Our website, swrbot.com, has all the information. Thank you all for attending, being great business advocates for Surrey and White Rock. Make it a great business day, everybody. Thank you.